Coming up on Colonial Crossfire, the attack against Syria, the new 9th Justice, and the Russia issue, at home and abroad. Joining us on the left, Martin McSherry, and on the right, Allison Kukos. And I'm your moderator, Casey Decker. This is Colonial Crossfire. There's a new justice on the United States Supreme Court, and that's not even the biggest story of the week. Welcome to Colonial Crossfire. I'm Casey Decker. Last Friday, President Trump ordered an airstrike in Syria. 59 missiles were fired against the Assad regime. The implications, foreign and domestic, will surely be massive. Here to discuss that and more, our student panel. On the left, Martin McSherry, a senior from New York studying political communication and criminal justice, and the president of the Pre-Law Student Association. And on the right, Allison Kukos, a junior from Newton, Massachusetts, studying political science, business, and communication. Allie is a newly elected chair of the GW College Republicans. Thanks so much for joining us, both of you. Yeah. We're going to start things off today with a quote from the president. Take a look.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
The strikes represented the first direct attack from the U.S. military against the regime of Bashar al-Assad, this time in response to the use of sarin gas. As I said before, the effects of this strike are already serious and wide-ranging, so we'll try to take this as systematically as we can. Let's start with this question for you, Allie. Was this a smart decision?
Yes, I think you see that because you already have people on the international stage like May and Merkel who both said they would support Trump. You have Republicans such as Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi who have agreed with him as well. I think the fact that there's both international and bipartisan support for these strikes means that it's the right move.
Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think a targeted, precise, proportional military response to war crimes such as these can deter future uses of chemical weapons, which is obviously a good thing. However, if you care about the humanitarian crisis, you wouldn't just launch Tomahawk missiles at it. You would have a robust humanitarian aid strategy, and you would start accepting Syrian refugees. Donald Trump has slammed the door shut on those trying to flee Assad's atrocities with his disgusting unconstitutional Muslim ban. If you look at a Syrian child escaping his destroyed home or her destroyed home, and all you see is a potential terrorist, then you don't care about the humanitarian strategy. You don't care about the crisis going on at the ground, and you need to confront your own biases before you launch another strike.
So, Ali, I wanted to ask you about that. Do you see a conflict there between Trump's statements that the attacks were because he cares about Syrians in Syria and his statements on refugees? How do you square those two?
I think you have to look at it from the perspective of what's best for our national security. And this idea of vetting isn't a new one. People have been vetted, every single immigrant who's come through this country, refugees. And how we do that going forward, I don't have the solution to it. But I think you have to understand there's a difference between freely letting any refugee in and understanding that there may be some people who are terrorists within those individuals. And some of these people are trying to flee essentially a war zone. So we'll have to figure out a policy to get there, but I don't think they contradict each other right now, no.
36 months. That's how long it takes to vet some of these refugees under the Obama administration. Last year alone, the Obama administration took in 110,000 refugees, well vetted, mostly women and children, fleeing Assad's atrocities. That's not letting anyone in. State Department professionals know what they're doing, and there has not yet been one terrorist attack in the United States from Syrian refugees, no matter what Kellyanne Conway will invent, such as the Bowling Green massacre, to scare us, so we don't allow refugees in.
So it's been 1 week now since the strike. Ali, why hasn't the White House released a long-term plan?
I think they are making a long-term plan, but they're not trying to be preemptive and put out something and then have to walk back later on. You're seeing a unified front. Both Tillerson and Haley, despite some disagreement in the beginning, have come out saying Assad's regime is coming to an end and they're going to be holding parties accountable. The White House does have a plan and they are working towards that, but I think it's also part of a greater strategy to fight ISIS. This is one part of that, but it's a much bigger project.
You mentioned Tillerson and Haley. They also appeared to contradict each other earlier when they were talking about the future of Assad in Syria, with Tillerson saying that the U.S. wasn't going to force regime change and Haley saying that Assad must go. Do you not see contradiction there?
He has come back and said, I want to just get the right quote, steps are underway for an international effort to remove him. This was, I believe, April 11th. So he has changed his tune and he understands the need to remove Assad in order to move forward in Syria.
What are your thoughts on the long-term plan? Does Assad have to go?
Tillerson and Haley are sending mixed messages on that, and so is the president himself. In 2013, he said, quote, we should stay the hell out of Syria. He told Obama, do not attack Syria after the red line. I think Assad cannot stay as a leader of his people, many of whom he has slaughtered. But the fact that the president has flip-flopped on this just such an about face in such a short period of time. He also once tweeted, now that Obama's poll numbers are in tailspin, watch for him to launch a strike in Libya or Iran. That's a really scary window into his mindset. A president with low approval ratings drops bombs to boost his poll numbers, not part of some greater strategy, a long-term deliberate strategy to solve a humanitarian crisis in a civil war with bad actors on both sides. It doesn't seem serious. It's incoherent, and I really worry about his motives if he's not taking in well-vetted refugees, none of whom have committed a terrorist attack in the United States
Ali,
yet.
you seem to take issue with that. What's your response?
At least he's taking action. The Obama administration has a history of dishonesty in Syria. You've seen Susan Rice, who came out and said they removed chemical weapons literally this year. You had John Kerry reiterating those similar sentiments in 2014 and 2015, saying they were 100% sure those chemical weapons were gone. Obama himself said, quote, if we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. We had a red line. We didn't act. Obama's Syrian solution is now Trump's problem. And Trump, unlike his predecessor, is actually taking action, and that needs to be acknowledged and applauded because finally something is being done. Years of inaction have shown us that Assad will continue to act this way. And so the fact that we have an administration who's willing to hold him accountable needs to be acknowledged.
Trump said Obama needed congressional authority in 2013. He told Obama not to enforce the red line. He has no credibility to blame this on Obama.
I wanted to ask you, though, about the President Obama's 2013 deal. Like Ali mentioned there, John Kerry said that 100% of chemical weapons had been removed from Syria. How does that reflect on President Obama that there was this attack with chemical weapons in Syria?
It's entirely possible that they made them since then or that they kept them in violation of the deal, in which case I would agree with a proportional military strike such as the one the president did. But President Obama did act to save 110,000 lives last year alone. That matters. And by the way, after they struck the deal in 2013, there were not the use of chemical weapons until after President Obama left office. But again, we have to stress those 110,000 lives he saved. That's action. Tomahawk missiles are not the only action you can take if you care about people suffering.
There are also, as we talked about earlier, a lot of other foreign policy implications, namely Russia. There was a meeting between Rex Tillerson and the Russian minister a little while ago that was pretty tense and didn't seem to go very far. Ali, are you concerned that these strikes are going to hurt U.S. relations with Russia?
I don't think it really matters at this point. There's been this myth peddled that Trump is the Manchurian candidate for the Russians. And I think it's just patently false. You look at the fact that Trump is standing up to them right now. They're putting troops in Poland through NATO. You have the fact that the UN security resolution Russia vetoed it. The United States is taking action, and I think right now we need to show Russia that we have the capability to address these issues on our own. We're willing to go try to stop Assad. We're willing to try to fight ISIS with or without their help. And right now, whether or not people want to pretend that Trump is in the pocket of the Russians, he is going to hold them accountable, and that's what we need. And I think right now, focusing on our relations with Russia, we need to acknowledge what's going on, but we also have to know they're not our only person we're dealing with. There's a much bigger picture in play, and we have to keep that in mind.
Martin, your thoughts on relations with Russia?
It's really important to stand up to Russia now. And I appreciate the president acting in this way to respond to these war crimes. However, as I said, it's not part of a long-term strategy. It's entirely incoherent. He's done an entire about-face on his stance on Russia and Syria from just a couple months ago. And so I worry that there's not a long-term deliberate strategy here to really tackle this complex problem.
Ali, Trump's change in policy hurt him a little bit in terms of domestic policy in some areas, in that he lost a lot of his base, it seemed, namely the alt-right seemed to really despise the fact that he was getting involved in Syria. Do you think that these actions will hurt him politically at all?
No, I don't think they do. I think if anything, it actually gives him more credibility. A lot of Republicans, especially the alt-right, who did vote for him, and some libertarian candidates, voted for him because they viewed him as an isolationist president. What we have to realize, though, is the world is increasingly becoming more international. Domestic policy has international implications. And so with Trump, you have to see the bigger picture. Republicans and Democrats alike have to understand he didn't really know or have full information before going to the presidency. Now he's getting more complete information, and that may mean policy changes. You have to adjust, and you have to be able to adjust to those pivots. And I think the fact that he is standing up to Russia, the fact that he is going and working with NATO, saying no, NATO is no longer obsolete, it actually adds to his credibility. And I think with some more independent voters, moderates, and even some conservatives and neocons, this will give him more credibility.
Do you think that Trump is pivoting?
Yeah, it's more than a pivot. It's just a complete reversal, which I think takes away his credibility. To say NATO is obsolete, and then to say, oh, well, now that I'm president, you know, they're no longer obsolete. I mean, the men and women of NATO who have died fighting alongside the United States, the only time we've ever triggered the charter of NATO to go to war was after September 11th, and then to denigrate our allies by saying it's obsolete, and then as soon as you need their help, to say, no, it's not obsolete anymore. You don't have any credibility now. You seem capricious, you seem arbitrary, and you seem short-sighted, which I think is apparent to most observers of this president's foreign policy.
A lot to talk about here. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wrap things up there. When we come back, Justice Neil Gorsuch, it's official. So what will it mean for the Supreme Court? We'll discuss right after this.
Over the fall semester, GW student-athletes have participated in over 4,800 hours of community service throughout the DC metro area. In a competition organized by Helper Helper, GW has completed more service hours than any other NCAA Division I or Division II institution. We are now in our final week. Follow GW Sports and Helper Helper app on Twitter to see the final rankings.
All right, we're back now and turning our attention to the biggest domestic news of the week. That would be the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Gorsuch fills the seat left vacant by the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia 14 months ago, one that stayed vacant throughout the final year of the Obama presidency as Republicans refused to consider nominee Merrick Garland. In Gorsuch's confirmation process, Senate Democrats filibustered. To break the filibuster, Republicans changed the rules of the Senate, invoking the so-called nuclear option and lowering the number of votes required to stop debate. Here's Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on his opposition to Gorsuch.
He was unable to convince me that he would be a mainstream justice who could rule free from the biases of politics and ideology. His career and judicial record suggest not a neutral legal mind, but someone with a deep-seated conservative ideology.
We'll start with you, Martin. What concerns do you have about Gorsuch?
Well, number one, it's a stolen seat. Plain and simple, it was theft. You don't do this. President Obama was elected by the American people for the first time since FDR for a Democrat, with a majority of the American people twice for 8 years, not 7 years. He had not only the constitutional prerogative, but the obligation to fill that seat.
I do want to ask you, though, about Gorsuch himself. Do you have concerns about his ability as a judge?
Context is important, but and so the difference between Gorsuch and Garland, to whom this seat belongs, is important. Garland was a centrist, moderate, well-qualified judge. Gorsuch is really a right-wing ideologue. I think he's qualified. I think under normal circumstances, I would give him more due consideration and look more into giving this president the choice to fill this seat. But the fact that he picked a right-wing ideologue to fill a stolen seat and then changed the rules of the United States Senate through a nuclear option, the way Democrats never did in 2013 for Supreme Court seats to eliminate the filibuster, I think is a horrible partisan move that will ruin the institutions of the United States Senate and the Supreme Court for generations.
Do you think this is a stolen seat?
Absolutely not. Yes, Obama can try to appoint someone. It doesn't mean they have to vote on it, and he wouldn't have gotten through. I think that this myth that it's a stolen seat is totally wrong.
What about a hearing? Should Garland have gotten a hearing?
I do think he should have gotten a hearing, but it doesn't mean that it's a stolen seat. The Republicans wouldn't have appointed him. They wouldn't have voted him through.
Anyone at all.
They wouldn't have voted them through, no.
Anyone at all.
And I want to also, I love this idea that the Democrats wouldn't have done a similar nuclear option if they had a majority right now. Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's running mate, said, quote, "I was in the Senate when Republicans stonewalling around appointments caused Senate Democrat majority to switch the vote threshold on appointments from 60 to 51. And we did it on everything but Supreme Court justice. If these guys, the Republicans, think they're going to stonewall the filling of that vacancy or other vacancies, then a Democrat Senate majority will say, we're not going to let you thwart the law." I think that directly implies they would have invoked the nuclear option, and the fact that they're, quote, claiming to hold the purity of the Senate because they're against this option is just ridiculous.
Yes, so Barack Obama, since 1789 to Barack Obama, half of all filibusters of judicial nominees were of Barack Obama's nominees, not because he was nominating 25-year-old communists to every seat, but because of unprecedented obstruction, the likes of which we have never seen. So to respond to that, by putting up Merrick Garland, who is a centrist, well-qualified jurist, and then to say we will not consider anyone whatsoever for this seat, that's not advice and consent. Their advice was, you don't get to be the president for this year. You're an illegitimate president.
Do the Democrats do you think the Democrats set the precedent for triggering the nuclear option, though, when they used it for lower seats?
No, there's a reason why we didn't do it for the Supreme Court.
Because
right?
it wasn't necessary.
Well, because you don't do that, right? Because the Supreme Court's the highest court in the land.
Well, Tim Kaine seems to think that it's completely okay to do that.
In response to this unprecedented obstruction, then yes, I think Republicans started this when they started this new rule that says the President Obama is not a legitimate president and he doesn't get to be president for his last year in office.
Democrats seem to think that they can break the rules and it's okay, and Republicans aren't allowed to do that. There's a complete double standard and a level of hypocrisy. When Harry Reid decided to change the Senate rules for lower appointments.
But why were half of all judicial nominees since George Washington held up under Barack Obama?
The fact that Ronald Reagan had 2 of his Supreme Court justices or nominees.
People got on the court for Reagan, by the way.
Well, Kennedy did eventually, but
I do want to get back to Gorsuch now, though. I want to ask you a little bit about the future with Gorsuch. How do you think he will change the makeup of the court?
I don't think him filling Scalia's seat will change it. He's a similar originalist, textualist type judge. Now, should Kennedy retire, I think that would permanently put the court more of a right-leaning ideological slant. But I don't think Gorsuch himself will change anything right now.
What about you? Do you think he'll change the makeup of the court?
Oh yeah, for a generation. The American people in 2012 said we want 4 years of Barack Obama. They did not vote.
They didn't say they wanted 4 years of Hillary Clinton.
Oh yeah, but they said they wanted 4 years of Barack Obama, but also 3 million more people said they did want Hillary Clinton, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that Neil Gorsuch could nullify same-sex marriages across the country. He could restrict or end a woman's right to choose by overturning Roe versus Wade. And he very likely supports the disastrous Citizens United decision that allowed an unlimited flow of corporate money into our elections.
So the unions can have a say, but corporations can't. That makes sense.
No, they both should have limits. The limits were taken off for everyone. I think they both should have limits, and that's why we should get rid of Citizens United, which allowed unlimited donations by unions or corporations into our political process. We shouldn't say we can only allow corporations or unions. No, we should have limits like we always have until Citizens United.
Ali, back to the nuclear option. Senator McCain said that he was concerned that the use of the nuclear option would change the way the Senate operates. Did you support the use of the nuclear option here?
I did. And to be totally honest, it's part of the reason why, and I will say this on TV, I voted for Trump. Because one of my biggest issues was the Supreme Court. And you had to look at it. I was terrified to see what Hillary Clinton would do to the court. Some people on the left think the court should be this ideology-driven machine to enforce what they think is popular right now. That's not the point of the Supreme Court. It's to uphold the Constitution. And I knew that Trump, even though there are some issues with him, he would appoint a justice who would fulfill that.
Was Merrick Garland an ideologue?
Oh, absolutely. I
You really think so? Everyone said he was centrist, including Orrin Hatch on the floor of the Senate.
He is a centrist,
they all
but
said
at the same
he's a
time,
qualified
he's still
centrist moderate judge.
There are small business decisions that he made as a judge that I did not understand at all that seem to be driven by ideology. And so I think Gorsuch will be a fantastic justice. And people who disagree with me, they can disagree with me. But to say that when his confirmation hearing, asking him questions about future cases, that's unprecedented. He'd have to recuse himself from future cases if he commented on them now. So I think there was a different standard held for Gorsuch, and I'm glad and thrilled that he'll be serving on the Supreme Court.
Well, we could talk about his previous cases. The frozen trucker case, I think, is an outrageous way of siding with big corporations. There was a trucker in his truck in sub-zero temperatures, freezing, and he left to save his life and got fired. Gorsuch was the only judge on that panel who dissented and said he should have stayed in that truck. I mean, come on, that is ideological. Merrick Garland was not like that. Merrick Garland had the support of Republicans before they decided to go forward with this unprecedented brinksmanship that Democrats never did for the Supreme Court.
Martin, question for you. Do you think the Democrats should have saved the filibuster for a potential future justice because there's a chance that Justice Kennedy or someone else retires in the course of Trump's term? Do you think that that's something that might have been a mistake on their part?
That's not how it works. It's not like Scalia passes away, the great Antonin Scalia, and then you have to fill that seat with a conservative. No. The president of the United States at the time gets to fill that seat. When Republicans decided that Barack Obama is an illegitimate president and doesn't get to fill this seat, he's not president for the last year, I mean, come on. And he said, Mitch McConnell said, let's let the American people weigh in. And by a margin of 3 million,
Hillary Clinton.
By a margin of 3 million, we won the popular vote.
Which is essentially the state of California, though. You have
they don't matter?
The coast shouldn't dictate what happens in this country.
No, you're right. The majority.
Yeah, well, the Electoral College is in place for a reason, to give states the right to have that opinion.
Originally slave states.
Guys, we don't want to relitigate the election here right now. Let's ask you one more quick question before we wrap. Gorsuch clerked for Justice Kennedy in the past. Do you think that will impact the court?
I don't think so. I think Gorsuch is his own person.
Yeah, he's certainly not as moderate as Justice Kennedy, and I don't think he'll be as fair as Justice Kennedy either.
Well, we'll have to wrap things up there. After this break, though, it's rapid fire. Stay with us. Our panel joins us again now for rapid fire, some quick answers to some quick questions. First, an update in the Russia meddling investigation. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes was heading the investigation into potential ties between the Russian government and the Trump team. Last week, he recused himself from that investigation because he himself is now being investigated for potentially releasing classified information. Martin, we'll start with you. Nunes, how damaged is his credibility?
Well, I'm happy he resigned from leading the investigation because he's lost all of his credibility. This is a very, very serious investigation. He was not committed to getting to the bottom of it in a fair and independent way. I mean, just this week, we have Trump's campaign manager registering as a foreign agent. We have the FBI, a leak saying that the FBI got a secret FISA court warrant to monitor a Trump advisor during the campaign. I mean, and then we had, Michael Flynn resigned for lying about his communications with the Russians. Jeff Sessions doing much the same thing. There are lots of shoes to drop, and we need a strong, robust, bipartisan investigation.
Ali, do you agree? Is this investigation in trouble?
No, I don't. I think despite the ethics complaint, there's no evidence that he improperly leaked classified information in the course of this investigation. So I don't think his credibility is damaged. If you actually look into the allegations against him, there's no evidence to suggest that.
Why did he resign or recuse himself from the Russia investigation then?
Because I think he wants to make sure that this didn't mar that investigation. I think Trey Gowdy's going to do a fantastic job.
All right, now we're going to move on to our second rapid fire question. Unless you are from Kansas or a hardcore Politico, you probably missed that there was an election this week. Republican Ron Estes narrowly defeated Democrat James Thompson in a special election to fill the congressional seat left vacant by Mike Pompeo, who left to become CIA director. Allie, this race was not supposed to be this close, and I know it's early, but does it make you at all worried for the 2018 midterms?
No, because I think you have to look at the bigger picture. The Democrats, I have to give them credit, were extremely enthusiastic about this race. They put in a lot of time and money. But you also have to look at local issues. I think only focusing on Trump is wrong. Brownback does have low approval ratings in Kansas, and so saying this is all Trump's fault is, I think, putting all of the blame on one person. And that's just not possible. You have to look at every different factor that could influence this election, and local politics do influence local elections.
Does this make you optimistic for the midterms, or do you agree?
Well, certainly local politics counts, but they're sending this guy to Washington. The fact that Donald Trump won this district by 27 points, Pompeo by even more, that a Democrat could come within striking distance in the reddest of red districts, this is big. This is supposed to be a blowout. And so I think the progressive grassroots will be engaged. They will not let Republicans take away our health care, cut taxes for the rich, slash after-school programs, Meals on Wheels, without a fight. We're going to make calls. We're going to show up in 2018, and we'll see what happens.
And finally, some news out of your home state, Martin. The state of New York will begin offering free tuition at its public colleges and universities for students whose families make less than $100,000 a year. You don't need to be a New Yorker to take them up on that offer, but you do have to live in New York after you graduate or pay the state back. Martin, is this a good idea?
Okay, so I'm from New York. I'm a second semester senior. I'm about to graduate. I plan on staying in New York for 2 years, and they do this now after I'm in debt at GW, and I'm going back to New York anyway. But obviously, it's a great idea. I think New York's been suffering from a bit of a brain drain. We lead the nation in outward migration. And so the caveat that you need to stay around for 2 years, this will more than pay for itself. I think it'll revitalize New York, and it's a great plan that'll help middle-class families like mine really get a chance to give a better future for their children, many whose parents never went to college.
Allie, what are your thoughts on the law?
I just want to know where the money's coming from. I mean, to be totally honest, that's my biggest question. I mean, it's a great idea in theory, but you have to be fiscally responsible about it, and I just don't have enough information to know what they're going to be able to do to fund this long term.
All right, and with that, we will end our debate here on Colonial Crossfire. Allie Kukos, Martin McSherry, thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, Kellen Devery has our debate fact check. Welcome back. During our political discussion, a team of fact-checkers monitored our debate. Kellen Devery is here to fill us in on what we missed. Kellen.
Thanks, Casey. No blatantly alternative facts today, but some misrepresentations of the truth. First off, Allison, our conservative panelist today, claimed that both Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi supported Trump's strike on Syria this week. While Representative Pelosi did come out in support of the strike, Senator Schumer said, "Making sure Assad knows when he commits such despicable atrocities, he will pay a price is the right thing to do. It is incumbent on the Trump administration to come up with a strategy and consult with Congress before implementing it." Schumer made no direct statement in support of the strike itself. Next up, our liberal panelist Martin claimed that Obama saved 110,000 lives in his humanitarian effort to help the Syrian people. This is not quite right. Before Obama left office in 2017, he upped the number of refugees the United States would take from 85,000 in 2016 to 110,000 in 2017. Obama did not take these refugees in before the Trump administration took office, though, so Obama did not actually save 110,000 refugees Martin was referring to. Lastly, Martin also said that since 1789, half of all judicial appointees filibustered were Obama appointees. That's not correct. It's actually more than half. Since the founding of the United States government up until President Obama's term, there were 68 cloture votes called on presidential appointees in order to end a filibuster. But under Obama's first term, there were 79 cloture votes called on his appointees to end filibusters on them. That's all for the fact check. Casey?
Thanks, Callan. It's time now for Spilled Milk. Here's our tribute to the very best of late-night political comedy.
And we begin with the continuing investigation of Donald Trump and Russia, a scandal that we've been referring to as Stupid Watergate, because it has all the potential consequences of Watergate, but everyone involved is really stupid.
Fox News from multiple sources, there was electronic surveillance of Trump and people close to Trump, this is unprecedented, at FBI. He actually tagged the FBI in his tweet. It's only a matter of time before Trump starts conducting diplomacy via Yelp. North Korea, very crazy, bad hair, 4 stars.
As you can see, Donald Trump, is, despite being the official president, he's fallen down to number 7. Yes, after spending a few days lost in the Rose Garden. Horrible time for him.
Eric went on to rich mansplain that family connections don't account for all of he and Don Jr.'s success, saying, we might be here because of nepotism, but we're not still here because of nepotism. You know, if we didn't do a good job, if we weren't competent, believe me, we wouldn't be in this spot. So he's aware enough to realize he was born on third base and competent enough not to have wandered off into the outfield.
All right, well, that's it for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. For all the latest updates from our political team at any time, be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook, and check us out online at www.gw-tv.com. For all of us here at GWTV, I'm Casey Decker. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here next time.